While they are now seen in a more negative light as of recent events, microtransactions might be seen as unneeded in video games. But what if they are? What if they are a huge driving factor into keeping the cost of a game at the usual $60 price point? Well, today, that is exactly what we're going to discuss, and we're going in right now. Hello everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Jem Talks, the podcast in which I, GemRaider21, talks about all things related to gaming, technology, media, and the internet. Now, it should come as no surprise that AAA games are costing companies millions of billions of dollars to make, and it's just kind of crazy to think of like the amount of time, the amount of effort, the amount of quality assurance that has to go into these games, and yet games are still at that $60 price point. I mean, can you imagine a game 4 times, or let's be even more radical here, a game 6 times the size as something like Grand Theft Auto 5, which already had a huge map to begin with and like a whole lot of content around that. And I'm going to exclude GTA Online from this because that's its own separate thing. But can you imagine a game that big and it still costs $60? I mean, from the general consumer standpoint, it's gonna be like, hey, I get to spend $60 on a game, and that's all fine with me. But what about for the company? I mean, is $60 still pretty good for nowadays? Well, that should be changing rather soon, because I think it's pretty apparent that the cost of video games should be much higher than what they should be right now. And it is all because a company needs to break even in order to make a profit. What I mean by this is, not only do they have to pay off the staff for making the game, publishers to publish said game, but they also need to make money in order to keep the lights on in the facility. They need to pay off the marketing team. Pretty much all of the millions of billions of dollars that they poured into the game, they need to make it back times 2, times 4, times 6. Stack up that Kaioken, man. Now, with that said, even though that the prices of games should be much higher than what they are, we're still seeing games, AAA style games that I need to add, are still at that $60 price point. And the only thing that I can really think of that is a bit of an aid to this is microtransactions. Microtransactions might be the aid we need in order to keep the prices of games rather low at that same price point as what we're used to. Now, a bit of a disclaimer before I go into the rest of this video. I do not condone the current use of microtransactions. Alright, I'm mainly talking about with how EA handled it. I think we can all agree that the way EA implemented loot boxes and microtransactions into Battlefront 2 is rather scammy, pay to win, and not that many people like that. But I'm pretty sure that you've heard that same song and dance 1,000 times as it is already. So I'm not gonna bore you with the details. But just know, I don't condone the current use of microtransactions, and I do have a solution on how we can improve upon them. But that's for later on in the video. First, before I go into the meat of this conversation, I want to go over exactly what is a microtransaction and what are loot boxes and why there's so much controversy behind them. When it comes to microtransactions, you're paying for specific in-game items. This can be between in-game currency or like some premium currency to items that affect the game, like characters and guns, to even loot boxes. And when it comes down to loot boxes, they are, well, let's just say they're they're a loot box. There's really no other way of putting it. A loot box is a box of in-game items that are randomly given to you. Yeah, there's a huge luck factor when it comes to loot boxes, and the best way that I can kind of illustrate this is with the roulette system from Sonic Runners. That system that I really hated. When it comes to that form of, I don't want to say loot box, but it's kind of like an early implementation of a loot box. You do get to see a more visual representation of how everything is broken down. Something rare like a character has a very slim chance of being drawn, whereas something common like a basic power-up is pretty common. And that's kind of how loot boxes are. The rare items are much harder to obtain than some of the more common items. So like I said, there's a huge luck factor when it comes to that. But with the current stigma of microtransaction and loot boxes, they're seen as paywalls or pay to win. With this mindset, it's almost like the company is forcing you to pay money in order to complete the game. Unfortunately, this is why a lot of people were pissed off about EA, because people paid $60 in order to play Battlefront 2, and that is the current price of what I'm seeing as of December 8th. I don't remember if the price was any different, but I think some people bought like a special edition version of the game, which special edition versions of games cost much more than the base game, tend to be about like $80, close to $100, so on and so forth. But like I said, people spent money on a game just to unlock things that should have been there. Not that many people really resonated with that. I don't necessarily blame them, and that's where the stigma came from. But I want to go over why microtransactions should still stay in some games, and of a way that they can be implemented so that both the customer and the company are able to benefit from their existence. Now, with what I said earlier, I really feel as though that microtransactions help keep the cost of a game down. Like with what I said in the beginning, game companies need to break even with their game sales in order to make a profit. They need to pay off the millions of dollars that they spent on a game's development in order to make more of a profit off of it. Now, there are 3 ways that this can be done. Well, I take that back. There is a 4th option. I will say it, but I will guarantee it. No one is gonna like it. I don't like it, and no customer is gonna like it. But this is gonna be as it is. Option 1 has the game still be at the $60 AAA price point, and their microtransactions in order to get special items like skins, emotes, pretty much things that don't really affect the gameplay whatsoever. Option 2 has the game cost more than $60, so let's say the price of like some special edition version of the game. I'm gonna make some ballpark price of like $100, let's say out of pure randomness. That same game has no microtransaction, but the company needs to pray that enough customers feel obligated to buy the game. Option 3 is a little bit like option 1 and 2 in that the game costs $60 like in option 1, but it has no microtransactions like in option 2. But in this case, the company needs to pray that enough customers buy the game in order to break even. Almost similar with the situation with option 2. And now for option 4, which is the one that I really feel as though that no one would really like, and that is have the game cost more than $60 like in option 2 and have microtransactions like in option 1 so that the company has more room to break even. Now, before I go on with how some of these options work and don't work, I would like to say that it might not be the case right now, but in the near future, when AAA games cost much more than what they do right now, unfortunately, we're going to see more of option 4, have the game cost more than $60 and add microtransactions. Unfortunately, that will be what it is in the near future, but this is just a temporary solution for the current time. Now, with what I said, there are some problems with how option 2 and option 3 relate. When it comes to option 2, with a more expensive game with no microtransactions, not that many people are going to feel opted in to buy that game. Now, unless the game was like some special edition game in which you're buying the game and then you're getting added items like a real world statue valued at like $100, or like something special to go along with it, not that many people are going to pay for a more expensive game. Now, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I don't really see a lot of people buy special edition version of games only because of that price point. But if they're like a hardcore collector, then they have every reason to buy that super expensive version of the game. Likewise, with option 3, the customer is still going to be rather happy with the game being at the $60 price point, because that's what we all come to expect. But what if a game turned out to be a huge commercial flop? I'm talking about like Sonic 06 kind of flop. Like, game barely moves at all, or the game is just so bad that people returned it immediately because they felt that they just got robbed. Well, I mean, hey, you get your money back and all, but the company does suffer a bit. That is a lost profit on them, on game sales, and then they have to find some way to make up that money, or they're going to be financially hurting for quite some time. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty sure that if I was a company that had a huge commercial flop and had to pay back millions of dollars, I'm not going to be happy. Now, I do understand that there are companies out there like Rockstar that are going to be able to offset that with the amount of money that they already make as it is. So even if a game turns out to be a flop, they're not going to be hurting as much. But what about smaller developers, like some indie developer that has a AAA game price point and the game turns out to be a flop? So like, let's think of like the worst case scenario for Undertale, having that be $60 and then it not really moving. Then Toby's going to be feeling the financial hurt, and it's going to be a really bad experience for him, the company, so on and so forth. It's just going to suck. Now, in terms of option 1, having the game be at $60 and have microtransactions, that is almost as close to a happy medium that we can get. And this is where my proposal comes in when it comes to microtransactions and loot boxes. So this is how it's going to happen. When a customer buys the game, they're already going to get everything that should have been in the base game unlocked. That would be the characters, the weapons, the maps, all of that jazz. Everything that they, or what we should expect to be already in the game from the get-go, that's going to be in the game. No harm, no foul in that, right? Right. The game is going to implement some form of loot boxes. With these loot boxes, it's not going to include weapons or characters, but it's only going to include cosmetic items, almost very similar to how Overwatch does it, where in their loot boxes, you get things like player skins, player emotes, player sprays, icons, voice lines, and in-game currency that you can buy other stuff with. Now, what I really do like with Overwatch is that when you open up a loot box and you get a duplicate item, you get compensated for that. I believe it's like 50 in-game currency for every duplicate that you get. And it does stack up because when you unlock nearly everything, every time you open up a loot box, it's just going to be compensation currency. That adds up. And if you have a whole lot of loot boxes to open up and it's just nothing but compensation currency, as well as currency initially from the loot box, hey, that's more money for you. Now, the player does also have the ability to earn loot boxes by increasing their in-game rank. Just like in Overwatch, whenever you level up from like level 1 to level 2, so on and so forth, you're able to earn a free loot box. And in Overwatch, there are other ways that you can earn loot boxes, like winning 9 arcade games gets you 3 loot boxes. And I also believe your first win in arcade of the day or week or whatever also earns you a loot box. So you do have a couple of ways in order to get loot boxes, so you don't have to feel obligated to pay for them. If a player does want to buy loot boxes, they should be at a reasonable price and at a reasonable quantity, because the gamer should be able to buy like as many loot boxes as they want. If they only want to spend money on one loot box, then they spend whatever money that they do, probably like 99 cents. They want to spend money on like 20 loot boxes or so, maybe like 21 to make it a round odd number. Then the company can choose like an according price, maybe even add like some special deal on it. But with something like that, with a nice entry-level price point to buy loot boxes, then the customer doesn't have to feel like they have to spend thousands of dollars in microtransactions in order to get things that they want. So all in all, the player gets to get whatever items that they want. They don't have to feel obligated to pay for the loot boxes. And should they do buy loot boxes, the company gets to profit from the game sales and microtransactions. So in a sense, it's a bit of a win-win situation for everyone. So, like I said, even in the midst of all of this controversy around the subject, microtransactions do have a role in the cost of video games. With what I just demonstrated, they have the potential to keep the price point of a lot of these AAA games rather low. Now, I'm not saying that every game should include microtransactions, especially if games are only going to be like single player games, but they do help the company out with having another form of revenue to get money from, and at the same time also gives you the ability to unlock certain items. And if microtransactions are implemented perfectly, they're able to help keep the game cost at the usual price point of $60. Now, in terms of the player, they don't have an obligation to pay for loot boxes or microtransactions. They don't have any incentive to. But if the option is there for them to, and if they really want to, then it should be rather reasonable. And that's all that I gotta say for this episode of Jem Talks. Now, if you guys enjoyed what I had to say and want to challenge my thoughts, say so in the comments section. I would really love to see what sorts of perspectives you guys have. Not only that, in the comments section, also say what types of topics you want me to talk about. Like I said in my intro video, I am open to topic recommendations, and I would love to get some feedback on that. So, If you want a topic that you want covered on the channel, say so in the comments section. Also, if you want to hit that like button, show your support for the channel, and hit that subscribe button if you're new around to these parts, I'd highly appreciate it. And that's it from me. I'm JemRaider21. See you guys next time. Peaces.